She may be poor. That does not mean she is an idiot. Poor people have the same intelligence as the rich. She understands economics 101 just like the way you and I understand economics 101. Once I started talking with her, she told me she has 6 paid movie channels. As you well know, this is like Showtime, HBO, etc. She is a copious consumer of entertainment. Incidentally, if you're ESPN, sitting in Atlanta, and use the American logic for segmenting the market, you're not going to segment a housekeeping staff in a hotel as your primary customer. Certainly, she would not be the primary customer in the US. So you would have probably ignored her in India too. Now, what is happening here? So I asked her, 6 paid movie channels. That's pretty expensive. I would not have expected a housekeeping staff to have so much money spent on entertainment. And she told me, sir, you're absolutely right. But if I didn't have the 6 paid movie channels, my 3 boys will go out every day. When they go out every day, they spend a lot of money. By having the movie channels, I make them stay at home. So she has done her discounted cash flow analysis and figured out this is net positive. Then she said, if I don't have the paid movie channels, then my mother-in-law will go next door to watch a movie. If she goes next door to watch a movie, who's going to cook for my 3 boys? I have got to stay behind to cook for my 3 boys. Then I can't come to the hotel and make twice the salary. She may be poor. That does not mean she can't be a consumer. In fact, she is a copious consumer of entertainment. She may be poor. That does not mean she is ignorant. She may be illiterate. That does not mean she is ignorant. Poor people have an astute observation of value. It is for you to figure out what is the value they are seeking. And then use your technology, use your capabilities to come up with innovations to provide that value. In fact, if you're a multinational, if you want to win in emerging markets, never ever ask the question that is upfront. Never ask the question, where is the market for my transplanted Grover's variety? This is what Kellogg asked. How can I place my cornflakes into the breakfast market in India? You are completely lost. Instead, be humble and ask the question, what is the problem the customer is seeking? Let's assume we just landed on Mars. We are not in planet Earth. We are in Mars. Let's figure out what is the customer wanting. Then use your capabilities to unlock the market. Simply put, what I'm saying is, if you want to succeed in reverse innovation, you have to engage in out-of-the-box thinking. You have to think differently. In fact, I got this idea of thinking differently by watching movies. I'm a very big movie buff. I grew up in Madras, grew up on Rajinikanth, Kamala Hassan movies. See, this one movie of Rajinikanth, in the last 30 minutes of the movie, the villain ties down Rajinikanth and kidnaps the heroine in a Mercedes, of course. And then the police jump into the police van and start chasing the villain. See, the police van plays by the same rules by which the Mercedes plays. That means they can go on only the same kind of roads in which Mercedes rides. But Mercedes is much faster than a police van. So the distance between the Mercedes and police van is increasing and increasing. And after about 10 minutes, Rajinikanth unties himself. But he knows he is already 10 minutes late. And he cannot catch up with the Mercedes by playing by the same rules by which the Mercedes plays. We have to come up with an out-of-the-box solution. You have to think differently. So what does Rajinikanth do? He jumps on top of a horse. You see, a horse can travel on roads in which cars can't go. So he goes through a lot of back roads, climbs on top of a mountain, and jumps in front of the Mercedes. That is thinking differently. If India has to excel in reverse innovation, we have to produce more Rajinikanths. My point is simple. American companies, European companies, and all Western multinationals struggle in emerging markets. And Indian companies, the emerging markets are in our backyard. In India today, we have only served about 20% of Indians. Corporate India has only served 20% of Indians. The remaining 1 billion is right in our backyard. Who understands the customer problems in India? An American company or an Indian company? I say this is perhaps the single biggest opportunity for Indian corporations. If we want to capture this opportunity, we need to change our very paradigm of innovation. We think of innovation as value for money. I say innovation is about value for many. We have to change our thinking from value for money to value for many. And value for many implies let's offer a lot more value for a lot less to a lot of people. That brings in within it this frugal thinking, this notion of frugal innovation. If you take 100 people at random, 100 poor people at random, and 100 rich people at random, I say there is absolutely no difference. Poor people have the same desires as the rich. They have the same ambition as the rich. They have the same needs as the rich. Why can't they have the same access as the rich? That's the essence of reverse innovation. Perhaps I can close with this observation. Today I find in this world there is tremendous amount of disparity. The disparity in this world is huge. And if you take a country like India, certainly we made a lot of progress in the last 20 years. But I am ashamed to see India as it existed. Because whatever wealth we have created in the last 20 years is concentrated with a small pocket of people. We have close to 40% of Indians who are below the poverty line. This is almost insulting. We have tremendous amount of disparity in this world, and certainly in India, the disparity is visible to us. As business people, we create technologies to solve the problems of the rich. And we should continue to do that. There's nothing wrong in serving the rich. But my submission is, why can't you use the same know-how, the same capabilities, the same passion, and use your technologies to solve the problems, innovate and solve the problems of the poor? Why can't we use innovation to reduce this disparity? I think reducing the disparity has to be the highest form of human achievement. And that's the essence of reverse innovation. Thank you very much.
We have time for some questions. Please raise your hand. There are mics that volunteers will be sending in your direction. There's one up there you may start with. Go ahead, please.
Professor, I was a little surprised to see your $300 house as an independent unit and not as a high-rise structure. Isn't cost of land a big factor in pricing a house?
Yeah. Incidentally, that's just a single prototype. We haven't quite, this problem we haven't quite cracked. It may well be the solution is to go on a high rise, particularly in urban parts. whereas in rural India, perhaps a community kind of living where a cluster of houses could make sense. Your point is well taken. These are all the kinds of challenges we need to continue to work towards. What I was so gratified is, as a college professor, I had a thought experiment. I didn't spend a single dollar on this. We have now created a global movement. So many people have stepped forward and trying to see how we can push the frontiers. As we are speaking, there are experiments going on in Haiti, in Ethiopia, and certainly in many parts of India. Certainly in urban India, a high rise probably would make more sense. But related to what you're saying is, house is of no use without the infrastructure. Because just the house is of no use if there is no electricity, there is no sanitation, there is no water, there is no job. So the question is, the $300 house is just a metaphor to see how we can create an infrastructure which makes it a sustainable community.
Hi sir, this is Krishna. I run a startup. Just when you were speaking about this reverse innovation, I was thinking, I went, I read a lot about on the internet about you, that you work with a lot of big companies and advise them to go into the market. Let's say I'm a startup, and I cannot afford to get a lot of notes or a kind of people like you from the market to help to bring my business. How can you bring reverse innovation in that so that I can reach you to get the insight into my business?
By the way, reverse innovation perhaps has this biggest potential for startups, because reverse innovation is about innovation in poor countries. Surprisingly, the cost of innovation is not that high in poor countries. In a rich country, you got to spend a lot of money in innovation. In poor country, the cost of experiment is a lot less. Therefore, even a pure startup has the ability to participate in it because the investment requirements are not that high. The big companies suffer from a mindset problem, which is not there in poor countries, in startups. But this is what I would advise for startups. It's good to partner because you cannot unlock this innovation all by yourself. So it's good to find partners that you can work with in creating the innovation, but the opportunity is big. In fact, one of the things that I feel encouraged, India, the healthcare sector is in pathetic shape. Healthcare is accessible probably only to 1% of Indians. 99% of Indians really are left out of the healthcare system. But what encourages me is so many startups that I'm seeing in the last 10 years. Narayana Hridaya Hospital just one of probably 100 such experiments going on in India. And these are all done by startup companies, which have gotten venture funding and gotten into, in India, private sector is aggressively moving into the healthcare space, and I am really encouraged by that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Govindarajan. If you were to look back, prior to reverse innovation, there was all this interest and talk about fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. But then now this is a step up, talking about reverse innovation with quality and cost control. But looking ahead, where markets are not yet developed, whether it's in the West or in the East or in the South, the global South, the issues of things about ecosystems, things that are outside not just the single bottom line, where regulation is also very poor, and in a globalizing world, I wonder how one can really begin to address issues with green accounting still at a very early stage. Do you have any thoughts on that?
In fact, I would say the whole area of the renewables, sustainability, I think poor countries can take a lead. I don't even need to create a separate platform as much as it can fall within the reverse innovation rubric. Because when you start to think about it, the reason why a rich country like the US does not take the lead in renewables is it has got so much investment in the old technology. The same problem is telecommunications. India leapfrogs because we don't have landlines, we leapfrog to cellular technology. Similarly in the US, the energy industry was constructed 100 years ago. And the way we constructed the energy industry is energy industry has two parts, power generation and power distribution. And the power generation, we put up scale efficient plants because we put them up at a time when fossil fuel was cheap, fossil fuel was plenty, and environmental concerns were zero. So we put these scale efficient plants. And when you put a massive scale efficient plant, the cost of generating electricity comes down. But these plants are only few. But electricity is consumed all over the US. Therefore, you need transmission lines to drag that electricity thousands and thousands of miles. So US built a national grid. Whereas India, we don't have a national grid. And let's take this as an opportunity to really leapfrog. We don't need to replicate the US model, but leapfrog into renewables. That's why I say we ought to be taking the lead in battery technologies, taking the lead in powering this country with sun and wind and biomass and biogas and all kinds of. So energy is one example of how we can take a lead in sustainability. I say that's a big, big opportunity.
Professor Govindrajan, your lecture is very inspiring. Thank you very much. You talked about an innovator should think of starting an innovation on a blank paper. Start with a clean paper, you said. You also said passion is important. You cited that in the context of the artificial limb case. Can we also say the people who need to be innovating should think without budget? I'm asking this question because a lot of our corporate managers, they just can't think of innovation without a budget. I can think of doing something great if I'm given a big budget, or at least a good budget. Is it possible to, can you say that we should think of thinking without budget?
That is exactly the point. In fact, in the US, whenever we think of innovation, we think we can do innovation if we spend more money. I say you can be innovative by spending less money. Actually, the biggest problem maybe is we have so much money, we throw money at the problem without really thinking. Constraints need not have to be limiting, it can be liberating. In the right mindset, constraints can be liberating. Therefore, it's not a question of resources, it's really a question of imagination. And therefore, I would say, actually, if you give someone less money, they will actually use their brains and do something. If you give them a lot of money, they'll just throw money at the problem. And that is the reason why we are and where we are in healthcare in the US. Because we think the solution for healthcare in the US is spend more money. So we've been spending so much money that cost is going up, but quality is not there, and access is pathetic. So I say we got to think about, and in India, fortunately or unfortunately, we don't have money. We are a poor country. So we have to somehow think about different ways of doing things. Right, one last question.
Yeah.
Two more.
Two? Okay, yeah.
We'll do one here, one here.
Kohli from IFM Business School, Bangalore. It is observed that Western multinational companies have a mindset problem in India. So my question is, do you observe that there is some mindset problem in Indian MNCs when they enter the Western markets?
Oh, without a question. Having blind spots is not a monopoly of just Americans. Indians have as many blind spots about global affairs as anyone else has. So therefore, I think, in fact, this may be one of the biggest challenges for Indian companies is how do you really cultivate a global mindset. You really want to, in fact, maybe let me back up and maybe this is a good way to phrase where I see India is. I see India in three phases, economic history of India. Phase one was before 1990. Before 1990 is a license Raj. You don't have to be very smart to make money. As long as you got a license, you make tons of money. The key was to really produce the goods. There were always customers waiting to buy it because there was only one company producing any product. In fact, if you think about it, before 1990, the CEOs of Indian companies typically had engineering backgrounds because manufacturing was the key. Post 1990, the last 20 years, India has shown impressive growth by essentially becoming more efficient, producing things which the rich world needs at a lower cost. With some exceptions, by and large, we have played the efficiency game. That game is pretty much coming to an end. So in the next phase, I say the real challenge for Mahindra was now $12 billion. How do they become a $50 billion company? You want to become a $50 billion company, it's got to be anchored on innovation for India and then becoming global. In fact, this is the challenge for every Indian company. Whatever success we have achieved in the last 20 years is very impressive. We need to be proud of that, but the next challenge is we have to become a lot bigger and really exercise, really put India on the map, the global map. That requires Indian companies to really globalize based on innovation from India. And therefore, to become global, you have to have global mindset. This may be one big leadership challenge that they need to wrestle with.
All right, last question.
Good evening, Professor. I'm interested to know how reverse innovation works. I'm here.
Yeah, okay.
I'm interested to know how reverse innovation works for higher education because I'm associated with MYRA, so like.
One thing you need to bring electricity.
I'm interested to know how reverse innovation works in higher education system in India because so many B schools in India today, like ISB and also MYRA, brings faculties from across the world and give the same quality of education for almost manageable cost. So do you think this is an example or are we not there yet?
I can talk a lot about higher education and what we need to do. Let me phrase where India can take the lead by really talking about higher education in the US for a moment. The higher education in the US suffers from even deeper problems than our healthcare industry. In fact, the cost of higher education is growing so rapidly in the US. The college where I teach, Dartmouth College, the annual tuition is $85,000. So if you have to spend a little extra money, we're talking about $100,000. A kid which goes to Dartmouth College has to spend $400,000 for the 4-year education, which essentially means the super rich can afford it. They can afford to send the kid and pay $400,000. The extremely poor get scholarship, but the middle class gets squeezed out because they make enough money, they are qualified for scholarship. Either they take a loan, you take a loan for $400,000,